Hey guys, it's me Ryan, and here we have another really cool Blender tutorial just for you. And today this is what we're looking at. We're looking at bump maps. Ooh, bump maps. So this is something that I've done here, and I will show. This is like a small demonstration to show you what you can actually do with bump maps. Pretty cool. What do you think? Huh? Pretty awesome. Hey. All right. And so yeah, that's what I did with just these simple nodes over here. I know that this is nothing, too fancy, but it does look, look how cool it looks. Anyway, I was just really amazed. Anyway, so yeah, let's go. Before we get started with that, I'm going to take a screenshot. This is for the for the cover, for the thumbnail that you clicked on. Yep, this is where I got it from. Alright, so there you go. Let's give this a shot. So maybe try one like this. What do you guys think? One like that, and maybe a nice bigger one. Alright, Bob's your uncle. Alright, well, that was nice. Here we go. New file, don't save. Oh my goodness, what did you just do? Alright, so today we're looking at bump mapping. And if you've ever wondered, what is this bump mapping? What does it look like? How do I work it? Today you're going to know exactly how we can do something really cool with bump mapping. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use a texture called the noise texture. And we're going to use this to demonstrate bump mapping. Now if I attach this straight like this into the base color, you'll see exactly what noise is. There you go. You can see it's just a randomness, a random texture. Pretty cool, huh? And as we've learned already, if you have been following me, if I plug factor in, it's a black and white version of that. And if you've been working with a lot of Blender, After Effects, those type of programs, you know that a noise texture is just a random noise. Yes, let's call it random noise. Okay, very cool. But now what we're going to use here is I'm going to use noise as an example to show you how you can take a texture and make it look more three-dimensional, a lot like that cool texture that I created before this that I opened it up with. So I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to get all the options here for different nodes that I can add to my panel here, and to bring this texture to life and make it 3D, I've got to add in this little bump node over here. So I'm going to connect it. If you are familiar with the Principled BSDF, very cool node. You can make it like basically almost everything, if not everything, with a couple simple controls here. I think I need to create a new tutorial with this Principled BSDF. But anyway, just before we get there, I want to take this time and just really show off my render engine. So Blender, I think it's from 2.7. I stand to be corrected, or just 2.87. I can't exactly remember which one. But it came with this Eevee render engine, which it's a gaming engine basically. So it's not extremely realistic, an extremely realistic render engine, but it is pretty darn close. All right, there was a movie that we were working on, or am working on at the moment. As at the time that I'm creating this, there was a digital clock that I had to put on a wall, and to make it look really cool, really realistic. And I used this Eevee render engine just because it renders very quickly and it looks very cool. Okay, but where compared to cycles can look even more realistic. You got a lot more options and stuff like that. I'm not really a big render boffin. If it looks cool for me, and in fact my rule when it comes to CG is that if I'm convinced, then I've done a good job. So in other words, if I fooled myself, then that's pretty cool. So I'm using the Eevee render engine. I don't even have my viewport rendering samples that high. and that is what makes this very, very powerful. Love this, very, very cool. If you're more into sort of if you're very specific and very details, actually, I don't know at what point. I think if you had to compare two renders, and literally if you create a cool material and it looks good to you, change between the two, between Cycles and Eevee, and you can see a comparable difference. But for me, Eevee is awesome. I love it. All right, so before we get there, so I'm going to plug my bump node, the normal, into this normal over here. Okay, I am in render preview. And then I'm going to plug my noise texture, the factor, so the black and white version, into my height map. And you'll start seeing the magic starting to happen once my machine pulls itself together. There you go. Now, the basic thing about bump mapping is that you can see how it looks a bit more 3D. In other words, it looks like it's the surface has some texture to it, but it's not real, because if I put the block at this angle, you can see how the block is still straight. So in other words, it's like an illusion basically. And the first thing that I want to make note of here is basically how bump mapping works with your lighting. So if I take this light over here and I move it down, and I change my rotation, my rotation point to my 3D cursor, which is right in the center there. All right, and I do this and I rotate in Z. You can see how the shadows shift. So bump mapping works with your lighting, which is a bonus. Pretty cool, pretty awesome. You can see how there's shadows on this side, and you can even see over here there's these slight lines, because obviously from where the lighting is, the bumps might have a slight, might be casting a bit of a shadow. The options that we have here on the noise texture is obviously my scale. So when I bring the numbers up, it's going to scale the image bigger. So you can see how we get a bit more of it's looking a little bit more cooler now, isn't it? Look at that, pretty cool. My detail is obviously a finer detail within it, and this is where the magic happens. So I take this from 2 to 6, and you can see how you get this like really, really nice finer type of grain. I'm going to take this scale to 6 and my detail to 6. Okay, and you can see how it's looking pretty cooler. All right, then my roughness is obviously, well, now we start getting this like finer type of sand. And I mean, this is you can already see how this Eevee engine, it's not super realistic, but look how, it's actually quite amazing just looking at this texture and what the bump mapping is already doing. All right, and note that I'm busy screen recording on this Mac. All right, and I'm also giving my CPU quite a bit of work to do. And the thing that I know that the Blender developers were basically a lot of their work, something that they either have aimed to do already or that they're aiming at, is that with the amount of power that there is in CPUs these days, in fact you call these things called AGPUs or ACPUs, where it's like a mobile phone where the CPU and it's like a system on chip. The amount of technology that's actually going into CPUs these days, the GPU will eventually fall off the grid, where the CPU is now powerful enough, and the way that it processes images and that, the GPU might in a very far future be obsolete. And I know that's something that the Blender developers have done really well, is made it that Blender functions quite well on a CPU. All right. Obviously, my Mac does have a GPU. It's an Intel GPU. It's not really that great, but it functions really well on my Mac with this Eevee renderer. So, anyway, back to these nodes over here. So you can see how just by tweaking my scale, the amount of detail, the roughness of this texture, it looks pretty awesome. I want to show you one or two more things here. So distortion, I'm going to push this up. It does something pretty fascinating. Can you see how it creates these patterns? All right. I mean, I could easily fake, the surface of Mars, or I mean, look at that. It's really, really awesome. Really, really like this. All right. Just by tweaking these couple settings, and you can see how quickly my render catches up with the Eevee render. Love it. Thank you, guys. All right. If you want to know what version I'm on, it's probably cut off, but it's 2.92 at this time of recording. So the other thing that I want you guys to check out is with this bump node here, you've got two options here. You've got your strength and you got your distance. And your strength is basically to do with your shadow. So I'm going to pull down the roughness back to 5. And that's just because I do want to see a bit more shadows on here. And this is to adjust your shadows. So the one is the strength of your shadows. And it's basically, distance is your shadow distance on how long those shadows are. All right. If I lengthen this, you can see how they get quite stronger. And then my strength is basically how strong my shadows are. You can see how the shadows have weakened. The contrast has there's not as much contrast anymore to the image. And then your distance is how long your shadow is. All right. And so that is with bump mapping, and that is quite how powerful just this tool and Eevee is. So yeah, that's bump mapping. That's pretty something simple. And then what I was able to do was just sort of mix two textures together, if you will. So I'll just give you a quick demonstration on this. It's one of my favorite textures that I had. So if you want to make this easier on your machine, because you can see now my Musgrave texture fell into my bump mapping now, and my goodness, who knows what this is doing to my recording. I'm just going to unplug this, and I'm going to get a texture right through here. Alright, so I'm going to look at my Musgrave texture. I'm going to do something like, let's say something maybe like that, less detail, just so we can almost get that yeah, I think that looks like something I can work with. Alright, and I'm going to use a MixRGB, plug that into my base color, and then I'm going to plug my two textures, one into here, and the other one my factor into here. And of course, this little guy, this node over here, is going to mix my two textures together. You can see exactly what it's done there. And then when I'm happy with it, you can play around, change, your different methods here. So that's darken, whatever, multiply. I'm going to stick with max, and you can even change the factor here. Maybe you wanted to go more towards the noise texture. Then I can just push it over that way, and you can see the interesting stuff that it does. And then when I'm ready, I'm just going to plug that into my height map. And the cool thing is that what you can also do is, if you want the bumpiness and you also want the actual texture on there as well, I can pull two out of here, pull that into my base color as well. And then after a while, hopefully this is not messing with my recording. Alright, if you have something special on here, I mean, look at that. If I put it up closer, that's quite interesting, isn't it? That is pretty cool. Okay, so there it is. I'm going to take a snapshot of this, because maybe I might choose to use this one as my thumbnail. Maybe we'll do something like this. Okay, so guys, I know that was super useful for you guys. There's your bump mapping and how bump mapping works and all the other cool stuff that you can add in. I'm sure you got ideas, so go ahead, play around. Guys, until the next video, see you then. Please, before you go, do me a favor, hit subscribe to Active TV, because we have loads of other stuff for you as well. Go check out the other videos while you're at it, because it's not just tutorials, it's lots of other stuff. It's like basically a a TV channel. All right, so we've got loads of other stuff that we're doing. And yeah, subscribe, hit like because you like this channel. If you're on Rumble, give me a Rumble. If you're on BitChute, give me a like as well. Guys, check you next week. Cheers.